Celeste Monroe walked into the bank expecting a routine transaction. But when a simple withdrawal turns into a humiliating ordeal, she's forced to confront more than just red tape. Treated with suspicion despite her success, Celeste stays calm until one phone call flips the script entirely. What happens next leaves the entire bank stunned. You won't believe who she calls, and how everything changes in seconds. The rain fell in relentless sheets over Paris, turning the cobblestone streets into glistening mirrors of the city's golden lights. Celeste Monroe stood beneath the awning of Banque Nationale de Paris, her tailored trench coat damp at the shoulders, her leather briefcase clutched tightly in one hand. At 38, she was a woman who commanded spaces, her sharp jawline, piercing brown eyes, and the quiet confidence of someone who'd built an empire from blueprints and grit. Her architectural firm, Monroe Designs, had just won a contract to redesign a historic wing of the Louvre, a triumph that cemented her as one of the most sought-after architects in Europe. Today, she needed cash, $250,000 in euros, to pay a contractor in advance for materials. It was a routine withdrawal from her business account, one she'd made dozens of times before. Inside, the bank hummed with the muted clatter of keyboards and the soft murmur of French voices. Celeste approached the counter, her heels clicking against the marble floor, and presented her documents: passport, business license, account details, and the withdrawal slip. The teller, a young woman with a tight bun and nervous eyes, scanned the paperwork, then hesitated. "Madame Monroe, I'll need to consult the branch manager for a transaction this large," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Celeste nodded, unfazed. "Of course, I understand." She waited, her posture impeccable, watching the teller disappear behind a frosted glass door. Minutes ticked by, 5, then 10. The lobby grew quieter, the air thickening with an unspoken tension. Celeste felt it, the way eyes darted toward her then away, the way the security guard by the entrance shifted his weight, his hand resting a little too casually on his belt. She'd felt this before, this subtle tightening of the world around her, a silent question mark hovering over her presence. But she'd learned long ago to let it roll off her like rain. The branch manager emerged at last, a wiry man in his 50s with thinning hair and a pinched smile. His nameplate read Jean-Paul Dubois. He carried her paperwork as if it were evidence in a trial. "Madame Monroe," he began, his tone clipped yet polite, "I'm afraid we cannot process your withdrawal today." Celeste tilted her head slightly, her expression calm. "May I ask why not?" "It's a matter of security protocol," he said, folding his arms. "A sum this large requires additional verification. We must ensure the funds are properly accounted for." Her eyes narrowed, but her voice remained steady. "I've provided every required document. My account has more than enough to cover this. I've made withdrawals like this before, here, at this very branch. What's changed?" Dubois shifted, his smile tightening. "These are internal policies, madame. I'm sure you understand. We must protect our clients and the bank." Celeste let the words hang between them, her gaze unwavering. She saw it then, the flicker in his eyes. Not malice, not outright disdain, but something subtler, colder, a calculation, a judgment. She'd seen it in boardrooms, on construction sites, in the pursed lips of men who assumed she didn't belong. It was the quiet hum of racism, dressed up in bureaucracy. "I'd like to speak to someone higher up," she said evenly. Dubois blinked, caught off guard. "That won't be necessary. I assure you, it's not a request," she cut in, her tone still soft, but now edged with steel. She pulled her phone from her coat pocket, scrolled through her contacts, and tapped a name. Claude Lefebvre, the bank's regional executive director. She'd met him at a gala 2 years prior, when Monroe Designs renovated his summer home in Provence. They'd bonded over a shared love of modernist architecture. She hit call and pressed the phone to her ear, her eyes never leaving Dubois. The manager's face paled. "Madame, please, there's no need to escalate." "Claude," Celeste said into the phone, her voice warm but firm. "It's Celeste Monroe. I hope I'm not interrupting. I'm at your Saint-Germain branch, and I seem to be having an issue with a withdrawal. Yes, $250,000 from my business account. Everything's in order, but Monsieur Dubois here says it's a security concern. I'd hate to think this is anything personal." Dubois stiffened, his hands fidgeting at his sides. The teller behind him stared at the floor, her cheeks flushed. The lobby seemed to shrink, the air crackling with the weight of Celeste's words. She listened to Claude's response, nodding once, then handed the phone to Dubois. "It's for you," she said, her lips curving into the faintest of smiles. The manager took the phone with trembling fingers, his voice dropping to a murmur as he spoke. "Oui, Monsieur Lefebvre. Non, ce n'est pas. Je comprends, bien sûr." His eyes darted to Celeste, then away, his pinched smile gone entirely. After a moment, he handed the phone back, his jaw tight. "It seems there's been a misunderstanding," he said, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. "We'll process your withdrawal immediately." "Thank you," Celeste replied, her tone as smooth as glass. She watched as he barked orders at the teller, who scurried to comply. Within minutes, a sleek black case was placed before her, filled with crisp euro notes. Dubois hovered nearby, his authority deflated, his eyes avoiding hers. "Is there anything else I can assist you with, Madame Monroe?" he asked, his voice a forced whisper. Celeste closed the case with a soft click, her movements deliberate. "No, that's all. But I'll be sure to let Claude know how this was handled." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "Have a good day, Monsieur Dubois." She turned and walked out, the rain still pouring, her silhouette cutting through the storm like a blade. The guard by the door stepped aside, his posture softer now, almost apologetic. She didn't look back. The next morning, Celeste sat in her office overlooking the Seine, the city's skyline a patchwork of history and ambition. Her desk was strewn with sketches for the Louvre project, arches and angles that would reshape a corner of Paris. The $250,000 was already with her contractor, the work set to begin that week. Her phone buzzed with a text from Claude Lefebvre. "Apologies again, Celeste. Dubois has been reassigned. Let me know if you need anything." She smiled faintly, then set the phone aside. But the victory felt hollow. Not because it wasn't real. Dubois's reassignment was proof of that, but because it was a battle she shouldn't have had to fight. She thought of her grandmother, who'd scrubbed floors in Louisiana to send her mother to college, and her mother, who'd faced down sneers to become a civil engineer. Celeste had built skyscrapers, won awards, dined with presidents. Yet here she was, still proving her worth to a man behind a desk. The rain outside tapped a steady rhythm against the glass, a reminder that the world kept turning, oblivious. She stood and walked to the window, her reflection sharp against the gray sky. Paris stretched before her, a city of beauty and contradiction, a place that had embraced her talent yet still questioned her presence. She'd won this round, reclaimed her dignity in that sterile bank lobby. But what about the next time? What about the others? The countless faces who didn't have a Claude Lefebvre in their contacts, who didn't have the voice she'd honed over years of battles. Her phone buzzed again. A new email. Louvre committee meeting. Urgent. She opened it, skimming the details. A board member had raised concerns about her firm's timeline. Concerns she knew weren't about deadlines, but about her. Another fight loomed, subtler than the bank, but no less real. Celeste straightened, her jaw set. She'd face it as she always had, calmly, fiercely, undeniably herself. The rain eased outside, a sliver of sunlight breaking through the clouds, casting gold across the river. She turned back to her desk, picked up her pencil, and began to draw. The story wasn't over. Not for her, not for anyone, for Sarah. And as the lines of her design took shape, bold, unyielding, beautiful, she knew one thing for certain. The world would bend before she did. The tale ends on a high note. Celeste triumphs, her dignity intact, her power reaffirmed. Yet it opens a door to the future, hinting at battles still to come. It's real, grounded in the everyday indignities of subtle racism, and leaves readers wondering, how many Celestes walk among us, fighting quiet wars? What happens when the next Dubois appears? The conclusion is hopeful, but not naive, a mirror to a world where victories are hard-won and never final.